So welcome everybody to today's session of United in Strengths, where we ask everybody to take a moment to breathe, remember, and connect. And that's connect with each other, connect with ourselves, connect with our character strengths. And as I mentioned, today we're going to be exploring the whole virtue of courage. So expanding out, bravery is one of the strengths that is part of courage. And today we're going to move forward with exploring the other strengths alongside bravery. And courage is a word with many dimensions, Betty says. So thank you for that, Betty. And that's actually what we're going to explore today, that courage is an attitude that's supported by multiple strengths. What I will say is I'm really happy to have Angela back. She joined us last week to talk about the strength of bravery. And afterwards, we had some really nice responses from everybody, and she agreed to come back and continue the conversation in our session
Continue
today.
to be brave with my camera on.
Ah, very good. Yeah, and that worked out okay last week, right? You got brave, put your camera on.
Yes, that was the very first time.
Excellent.
At least here.
Welcome back to Angela. And we're going to start with the emotions check-in. So for those of you who were here last week, you'll remember that we talked about how we're all making a transition. You're all transitioning from whatever you were doing right before this session to this session now, where we're going to be focused on courage and mindfulness. And so I invite you to do what we did before, of just take a look at this. This is the Robert Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions, and that is, it grounds us in some ideas of what emotions are. There's just a few sample emotions on here, and it's quite common to notice other emotions as you're going through. But take a moment. We happen to have it in English, Portuguese, and Spanish and Portuguese today. So that's from another presentation I was doing. So I'm going to give you about 20 seconds or so to check in and see what emotions are you feeling. And two tips. One is, don't be surprised if you feel multiple emotions at once. It's like character strengths. We have them, emotions are plural, just the same as character is plural. And also don't be surprised if you have conflicting emotions. So we can be apprehensive, but also anticipate something with excitement. We can be sad and yet serene or joyous about something else. And thank you everybody for sharing in the chat. Don't feel like you have to share. It's not required. I ask you though to keep a note in either on a piece of paper or in your head of what you noticed at this time in terms of your character strength, your emotions, because we will come back to it towards the end of the session, and we'll do a quick check-in to see what's happened during the course of the session. So Angela, I'm going to hand over to you to do some review of our celebration of bravery, and also to invite some comments about obstacles and challenges.
Well, it's wonderful to be back. So I appreciate if you were here last week, that we talked about bravery. And bravery we defined as your ability to face obstacles and to get things done. And lots of people took steps last week. Actually, your ability to face obstacles and finish anyway, facing your fear and taking steps. And so we had lots of people in the chat say what types of steps they wanted to take. And we took a retrospective step to look back over the past 3 or 4 months and notice ways that maybe you didn't think were brave before. And lots of you commented on how that was helpful in recognizing some brave steps that you took. And then at the end, we invited you to identify some steps that you would like to take over the past week or so. And so I invite you, if you were able to take a step over the past week or so, is to share a little bit about your experience. Did you have something to celebrate over the week? I know there were a handful of people that shared on Facebook what you celebrated. Someone spoke to a neighbor for the first time. Someone took a Zoom class for the first time. Many of you are turning your cameras on, like me, for the first time. So if you are able to take a step, I invite you to celebrate with us and give us a little bit of feedback about that experience. What did you gain? If you're
We'll do
interested.
that in the chat rather than.
We'll do that in the chat. Yeah. Okay.
And we did have some people at the beginning that were sharing some of their brave acts, like making clearer boundaries. Melanie sharing their making clearer boundaries. That was one that came up quite a bit before we started the main part of the session. We've had people who've made brave decisions about things like having surgeries and moving forward with, very personal and important plans, balancing the risk of getting together with someone that we're close to against the downside of being disconnected and not feeling close to the person. So
boundaries is a hard one because it speaks to one of the other strengths that we'll talk about today. It includes also honesty. So not only bravery, but honesty, which is one of the character strengths that make
people have been doing amazing work, I think. And someone
we have
asked
a really
about
brave group.
Sorry?
I said we have a brave group.
We do. And went to donate blood. Yeah. And I did see the question there about how to see the workshop on bravery. So I just want to be clear that these sessions are not workshops or classes. It's a combination of exploring character strengths in the context of wherever we are right now, plus meditation. And then we did last week set some challenges. For anyone who wasn't able to attend last week, we will be sharing the recording at some point fairly soon.
So I'm seeing several ways that people are celebrating the steps that they took. And I want you to, if you weren't able to take a step this week, even identifying a step that you would like to take or an area that you would like to improve in is still a step. So offering a little self-compassion and recognizing that wanting to take a step or even identifying the places where steps could happen is indeed brave. So having said that, if you thought about a step last week and something got in the way or you didn't move as well as you would like to, what challenges popped up as you thought about taking these brave steps over the past week or so? Okay. If you'd like to share that in the chat, you're welcome to. Know that Facebook is always a place. I realize that many of you aren't on Facebook, but it's an easy way for us to get together and continue the conversation even after the session is over. What challenges popped up for you? Okay. And I'd also like to add that I saw several questions in the chat last time about whether you needed to be brave, and that really is independent. It's very individual. Everyone has bravery as a strength. If it's not one of your top strengths and it's not something that you want to explore, this is just an invitation to experiment. So it's not an expectation that we have of you unless you have an expectation for yourself to explore this strength. Post-traumatic growth, I love that. Okay. So as we move on, we mentioned that bravery was one of the 4 strengths that make up the virtue of courage. So that overarching category or virtue of courage is encompassed with 4 other character strengths. The first one is bravery. The next is perseverance. And perseverance is really about stick-to-itiveness. It's not about the goal setting. For instance, we know lots of people that set goals. It's about completion or that sustained effort over time. Your ability to see things through is perseverance. The next is honesty, and honesty's come up for us several times here in the chat today. And the most obvious definition of honesty is about telling the truth, but that truth is also inward. It's about authenticity with yourself. So also taking responsibility for your own feelings and your own actions is a component of honesty. And then lastly, the 4th component of courage is zest. And zest is about vitality, your enthusiasm or excitement, how you approach your goals, how you look at the day. Do you wake up and with enthusiasm for what's going to happen for today? Do you approach activities with the level of enthusiasm? That's the component of zest. And all four of those things make up the virtue, or all four of those strengths rather, make up the virtue of courage. Courage is how we show up.
And there's some wonderful comments in the chat about that combine so many of those, you know. So there's the bravery of speaking up, there's the honesty of telling people what you really feel and how you really are and what really concerns you. And then there's using that energy of zest to sort of get us over the resistance to do something. And then that perseverance of, even when it's uncomfortable, keeping going, you know, not backtracking, not saying, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that, or I shouldn't have said that, not sort of apologizing for things that are important to us. So, and I was going to say that I will also be going through the chat from last week and this week, and anonymously we'll pull out some themes of what people have brought up so that we can share those as well, because there's just so much content in last week's chat and this week's chat that we obviously can't address it all in our half-hour session. So what else did you want to say about courage?
I think there's some discussion, or at least when I talk to people over the weekend about courage and bravery, that some people like to use those words interchangeably. And the guide that we referenced last week speaks to, so courage is a virtue, or the category is more about how to be and how to show up, and bravery is about the act. So the difference between the two is courage is more of an attitude and bravery is the act. There's a step or some movement, some engagement that's involved with the bravery.
And we talked about that last week in those sort of three areas of physical bravery, where we act to do something like rescue somebody or take some other physical action to help them. Then there's the psychological bravery of being afraid and doing something anyway. And then there's moral bravery of standing up and speaking up for something, even when it's uncomfortable to do so, because we feel that there's a moral obligation to do that.
I like to think of them in small bites, because if we can get our hands around them and make them a little bit more tangible, it's a lot easier to do. And if you recognize ways that you're already doing these things, look for places that you already have enthusiasm. That's where your zest lies. What are those things? And are you repeating those actions? Or how can you bring that into your current goal? If I think about goal setting, and I have clients that set both physical and mental goals, the bravery is the way that or honesty is the way we identify what it is that we want, being honest with ourselves. The bravery is the step that we take to approach it. Perseverance is seeing it through, and zest is the way that we enjoy it. So I frame it that way. It makes it a little easier to develop some small repeated wins.
So as everyone thinks about this virtue of courage, last week, bravery was something that we all kind of identified as can be pretty hard to use. It's one of the strengths that doesn't show up as very commonly as a top strength for people. So it's not likely to be a signature strength. And zest is like that as well. Zest is actually one of the strengths that is most often reported as a lesser strength. So in somewhere between 20 and 24. Honesty is very often reported as a top strength, in one of the sort of top 5 or so strengths. And I happen to work with a group who actually use honesty even more than most. So on average, about 50% of people identify honesty as one of their sort of core strengths. And I work with project managers, and they're up at 61% actually value honesty, which can be interesting. That same group of people, the project managers, tend to be high in perseverance. And we've figured out, as we are analyzing this and discussing this in groups of project managers, that perseverance can be a bit of a double-edged sword. So when we think about overuse and underuse of strengths, you know, as just the same as bravery can turn towards being sort of excessive risk tolerance and being foolish, foolhardy, perseverance can be something that we keep going even when everything points to the fact that we should stop. And we see that quite a lot with project managers, that they don't always have that perspective of being able to stand back and say that what started off as a great project is one that doesn't make sense anymore. And so that's where honesty can be really helpful, is when someone else can actually point out to them the reasons why it's worth reevaluating the project. So each of these strengths can be, like, honesty overused, not balanced out with kindness, for example, can be hurtful. And a few people have put in the chat about things that people have said to them that were hurtful, and they're working through using their courage to handle that negative emotion and that discomfort. And at the same time, the person who expressed an opinion maybe could have done it more sensitively. So balancing out these strengths with other strengths as well. And zest overused can be pretty irritating to a lot of people, especially if you have zest low, you know. So someone who's very zesty, full of energy, full of enthusiasm, woohoo, this is great. You know, for someone whose zest tends to be lower, it's like they may seem flippity-gibbetish and kind of insubstantial and flighty. And so sorry, some of those words aren't so obvious what those mean if your English isn't your first language. But zest can be something that gets under people's skin and makes them irritated because of that energy and enthusiasm and excitement, and not everybody is feeling that excitement.
Or even polyamorous, if it's not balanced out with honesty, this kind of obnoxious level of positivity, if it's not rooted in truth, might be quite annoying over time.
And Paul made an observation earlier that courage often starts with avoidance. So recognizing that we're avoiding something that we're uncomfortable with, and that can be any of these: avoiding doing something that's uncomfortable to take action from, avoiding doing something because we know it's going to be a long haul to get it completed, avoiding saying something because we think it's going to cause conflict and discomfort. And zest, maybe we don't avoid zest, but zest, as I said, is one that is more of a reach for many, many people. And someone asked about hope. Where's hope? So hope is actually one of the transcendent strengths. We don't have the whole sheet here because we're focusing on courage today. So hope is in the transcendence category, along with appreciation, gratitude, humor, and spirituality. And some of my top strengths as well. So for the people who are going, hey, where are my strengths? I know what you mean. So
it's not there.
It's that she's worried about being too zesty amongst some of her less ecstatic colleagues. So this is a wonderful opportunity to use your courage and your other virtues to think about, how do you balance that zest? How do you increase your sensitivity, your social intelligence maybe, and your kindness to others, your teamwork? What do they need in this moment? Maybe it's zest and enthusiasm, and maybe it is for you to take a step back and bring one of your other strengths to the fore. So really thinking about how we're using the strengths. So I'm thinking this might be a good time for us to go to our meditation. What do you think, Angela?
Okay. I think that's a great segue, and that will move us toward how do we engage these strengths this week.
So we're going to start with a meditation, and I'm going to finish with one of my favorite Rumi poems that many of you will have heard before. And then we will do the emotions check-in again, and we'll make some comments about that. And then we're going to discuss this week's call to action. And Lenore, yeah, I understand that zest is taking a bit of a beating for a lot of people right now. So it's still there. We can still cultivate it. We just have to find the ways of engaging it and boosting it. So for our meditation, go ahead and get into a comfortable position. It helps if your feet are on the floor. You can be sitting or standing or lying down. I like to meditate lying down. And you can either close your eyes or just adopt a soft gaze, not really focusing on anything, just having a soft gaze in front of you. And then let's just start by taking a deep breath in and filling your belly with air, and pause when you've taken that full breath, And then exhale it all out. Let's do that one more time. Taking in a deep breath. All the way into your belly. Pause. And then let that breath out slowly. More slowly than you took it in. And now bring your breath back to its natural rhythm. Feel any sensations in your fingers. Now explore the sensations in your hands. Maybe there's tingling, or heat, or a coolness. Or maybe your joints ache. Just make a note and let that be. And now scan slowly through your entire body, from the top of your head right down to the tips of your toes. Feel any particular sensations that come up for you. Notice if there are parts of your body that feel tight or uncomfortable. And don't worry about that. Don't need to do anything about it. Just notice and move on. Take another deep breath. Pause at the top. And then breathe out, this time through your mouth, making a sound as you do it. And as you breathe, use perspective to see your fears in a new way. Fears keep you alert. Fears keep you honest with yourself. Fears call for zest, energy, enthusiasm to overcome them. Fears help us build perseverance as we work to put them behind us. Fears beg for bravery to be met head on. And fears challenge us to grow into our best selves. Breathe in and see your strengths, see your courage. Breathe out. For each breath, you are breathing in courage. Give that courage a framework. Think of each of the courage strengths in turn. Remember bravery, to speak up or to act in accordance with the authentic you. Perseverance, to stay on your journey, moving forward, however slowly. Honesty, to see that your journey is unique to you and takes courage to stay on the path. Zest, to provide energy, to feel alive as you take on and embrace all that is you. Focus on one thing you want to do this week. Picture yourself doing it. See some of the potential obstacles. Visualize yourself moving around, over, and past them. using your strengths. Imagine the feeling as you look back at the end of the week and see how far you've come. Think about what your first courageous step will be when we end here today. And I'm going to finish this meditation with The Guest House by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So as you come back to the group, come back to the room, maybe take one more breath. Remember the out breath being slow is what calms the nervous system and brings us back to feeling even. And now as you open your eyes, take a look at the wheel of emotions again and think about the emotions you're experiencing now. So thank you, everybody. For those who are interested, that was The Guest House by Rumi. I will type it into the chat in a moment. Thank you so much for sharing your emotions the second time around. And I invite you to think about how your emotions have changed since the beginning of the session. And then consider, what did you do? Did we focus on the emotions? Did we explore them specifically? Did we try to tackle them, challenge them, change them? We talked about courage and the 4 strengths of courage, and we meditated. And the emotions took care of themselves. And for many people, the emotions do change between the beginning and the end. And this is a great reminder that even our most uncomfortable emotions don't last forever. They come and go. Sadly, so do some of our most positive emotions, but they come and go and they will come back. And we don't have to pay an inordinate amount of attention to them in order for them to transition to something else. In fact, when we pay attention to something entirely different, that's often when our emotions change the most. So, our call to action, Angela.
Hesitant to disrupt the level of peace that everyone has achieved at this point. So I will keep this brief. I'm really curious because you asked about a first courageous step over the next week or so. And so if I could fast forward just a beat, what is it that you would love to share with us that you accomplished? So you thought about the step during the meditation, what courageous step you would like to take. You could fast forward just a beat to having completed that step. What is it that you would love to tell us that you accomplished a week from now? It might be in the bravery category. It might be in the honesty step. That honesty might be a reflection of your own. Is it perseverance? Is it zest, approaching with a little bit of enthusiasm over the next week or so? So what is it you would like to accomplish? What would you like to share that you've completed between now and next week?